Hey guys, Kevin with Flatline Van Co. We are gonna run through how to install the front bumper on your Sprinter van. This is gonna be the same process for all 19 plus vans, 2500, 3500. This one is a pretty big install. Don't get intimidated by it though. We'll go through it real slow, step by step, and show as much as we can to help calm the nerves and make it easy, but it's gonna be good. So depending on what you ordered, if you got just bumper, skid plate with the nudge bar, you likely have a winch and some lights and the fair lead as well. You'll have a different amount of boxes. Leave those things packed up until you get to them in the step. Makes your life a little bit easier, then you're not mixing up hardware and stuff. Also, a great idea is to get all your tools laid out, print out the PDF instructions or have that on an iPad or your phone or something handy is also helpful to see. There's a full tool list in there so you can get all the tools ahead of time. Make sure you got a nice clean work surface and we'll dive right in. There is a bunch of parts inside of the box, but one to note for is this small little box. It feels kind of empty, but this is actually what your sensor bezels are in, so make sure not to throw this one away. Inside of the bumper box, you'll find two templates. Grab some tape and a Sharpie also, and we are gonna lay out the cut lines while the plastic bumper is still on the van. It's just a little easier to navigate around. First, take the smaller one. It's gonna go on the inside cutout section here. You'll feel where it pushes up against the edge, and then we'll get it taped in place. The next one is the larger template. You'll see there are two holes to align with the parking sensor bezels here. And you want to get this inside edge aligned with the dashed line here. What we're gonna do is we're gonna continue that trace line down and we'll come over and we'll stop right in this corner and then we'll jump to the backside here. The last piece of our cut line is to measure from the corner of this plastic where it meets the fender down 12.5 inches. Give yourself a little mark, and then we're gonna connect that mark to the notch in our template with a piece of tape. We're basically making a straight line from there, 12.5 down. Now we're going to trace the line in, fill in the dashed lines here, follow the inside edge here, and then on top of your tape line, then we'll pull the templates off and we'll connect all the gaps in between. You want to carefully remove your tape. We are gonna use these templates again on the backside over there. So as you're peeling them off, make sure not to tear this template. You'll also take this line and continue it all the way through to the back where the plastic ends and just keep the spacing relatively the same. There's some trim lock that'll cover this anyway, so it's not the most critical, but just keep that parallel to what it is. The same exact process on the passenger side. It is time to start our disassembly. So we're gonna pop the hood and we'll show you where to start undoing the plastic bumper. There are 3 screws on the top here that are T25 and then 2 more kind of tucked down behind these corners that you gotta get out. After the screws, there are going to be some fender well plastic rivets, just some like retaining clips in the wheel well here. There's 3 of them here on the other side, and then there's 2 underneath that you've got to pop out. A little pry bar tool or like a body panel removal tool like this is super handy, but a flathead can also work. With these pins, you're gonna need to pull the center out before you can get the whole thing out, and that kind of releases the pressure on them. There's also 4 other retaining clips underneath of the bumper here. They're not on this van already, so we're gonna cut and show you on a different van. Now we are ready to pull off the plastic bumper. You wanna grab on the corner here and pull out away from you. Careful not to pull too hard. The plastic clips are in there. You'll see this thing is pretty loose. But it kind of gets hung up on the center section here, so you want to pick up over the metal bumper that's in there as this comes out. And then again, be careful to not to drop this so it pulls on that wiring harness. The first thing to get out is your camera here. You'll see there's a little pin on top there you can maybe get to, or if you have that screwdriver handy, you can push that pin down and then pull on it. Next, we're going to pull the ambient temperature sensor right here. To get the parking sensor harness disconnected, you'll need a little screwdriver to pop this white cap up. And then once it's up, you'll push down on that and separate the lid from the bottom. Cool, that guy's disconnected. Then you need to disconnect your fog lights if you have those. Once the bumper's off, the next step is to remove the center support here. There's two T25 screws up here and then kind of a pin down low. Once you get it loosened up though, we need to be really careful with this adaptive radar sensor here. We'll pop that out and it actually gets pushed back through the backside of this bracket as you're taking it off. So remove this top guy here. You can push on it from the back. See how it's kind of clipped around that centerpiece. And then that lets the pressure off the top of this. You can kind of tip it forward and twist it up to get it free. You'll also need to fish your camera wire back through and then pry this little clip off of this. And then this thing can get tossed. Next, we are going to remove this metal bumper that's from there. You're gonna need a 13mm socket as well as the pry bar to pop off some of the wires back behind there that have the little zip tie plungers to hold them in place. Be careful as you take this off. You kind of need to roll it down. You'll see that there are two more clips on this harness right here you need to get off as well. You can toss that bumper that you pulled off, but you do need to save the bolts because we're gonna reuse these bolts. Now we are gonna remove the splash guard on the bottom side of the radiator here. You'll see that the rubber needs to be cut for these hoses to come out. Sometimes there's a slit there, sometimes not. They feed them up through, so if there's not, you just gotta take a knife. To remove it, there is tabs on both sides of these. You can kind of get your hand up in there, or if you need to get a screwdriver and push the tabs out away so that the splash guard can pull away from the radiator. On these ones, be careful. There are some of these hard lines that run right up against this, so you wanna be careful not to push too hard into those, but you kind of gotta work this tab from the front with the screwdriver to get it to pop out. What you're doing is trying to twist this barb back to the left so that it releases on that back hold. You're trying to get it to come out from behind it so you can pull it forward. That's all we've got for disassembly, so we are gonna move on to installing the winch cradle. This is kind of the centerpiece to the bumper. It's the steel parts that give it all its strength and rigidity and tie it to the frame. So we are gonna throw the winch cradle on using those same bolts that you use to take off the bumper. I like to get it up and get one on each side in, just so that it's supported and hanging, and then we're gonna come back and Loctite all of the bolts as we put in there, making sure to pull that one back out, Loctite it, and put it back in. The winch cradle is slotted to accommodate any tolerance in the frame mounts here, left to right. So once you get it loosely bolted up, you'll see that it can shift right to left. Just get it in the center of those slots. There's also adjustment when we go to mount the skin, so you'll be able to get that mounted up nice and center, but just center this in the slots so that it's tightened down. Next, we're gonna install the clip nuts into the slots over top. This is to mount the bumper to the cradle itself. The barrel side of this goes on the back, so you'll see there's a little clip that needs to get pressed over. And they kind of snap into place there, so. Once those clips are on, it's time to mount up your winch if you're gonna run one of those, or the light brackets that can fill that void if you're gonna run those instead. We're gonna run a winch on this van, but we'll show you really fast how those brackets mount up. The brackets have a little bit of an angle to them. You want them to angle to the front, line them up to the holes in there. We'll go one of these hex head flange 3/8 bolts, a washer and a nut. I'm gonna run them with the hex coming up from the bottom just so it's a little bit cleaner if you see it from the outside. You can run them going down if you want to though. We're gonna install Warren VR Evo 12 on this van. There are other winches that do fit. We have some dimensions on the website you can check out that gives kind of the parameters and the bolt pattern. Winches are pretty typical though, so you should be good to go, but double check with that. Hit up customer service if you have specific questions and they should be able to help you answer that. The hardware that they give you has these little square nuts. They get pushed in to the panel here, and then we're gonna get them up through the plate with washer, lock washer, and it'll bolt all together. The best place to run these wires is back down through this cutout here for these hoses, and then along the back side of the plate. And then there are some slots here that you can zip tie this to make sure that these don't interfere with anything. Once you get this winch bolted up, it's a good idea to get these zip tied in place before you move on. So we provided some zip ties, or you can get some from the hardware store. And then we'll feed these through this frame horn area right here, up and around, back up into the engine bay, where then we can connect them to the battery and to the grounding terminal. Now it is time to assemble the bumper together. You've got the two wing pieces and the centerpiece. So we're gonna lay these all face down. We're gonna use the 3/8 16 hex head flanged bolts, washers, and nylocks to assemble those together. We'll make sure that they all align really nice and all those faces align. It's a good idea if you don't have a nice tabletop surface to get a blanket or something so you don't scratch the finish of your bumper as well. Once you get all your parts laid out, we are gonna grab the 3/8 by 16 bolts, washers, and nylocks, and bolt the wings on. There are 7 holes, 4 up top, and then 3 down low here that align with the center section. You can run the bolts from the inside to the out or the outside to the in. It's really up to you. There's some tight corners that might need some combination of a short socket or a long socket and an extension in there, but we'll get them bolted up. Now on to the other side. It's the exact same process over here. If you are installing it with a bull bar, we're gonna run through that now. If you're not, you can go ahead and jump ahead and just ignore this step. It comes with the cover plates already installed, so no need to worry about anything. For the bull bar though, we are gonna undo these cover plates and reuse this hardware back in place to get this mounted up. So if you are running a winch, you're also gonna want to have a fair lead right here as well for that rope or cable. It comes with this cover plate already installed, so we're gonna undo that and then install the fair lead in its place. So for now, we're gonna set the hook, the pin, and the snap ring off to the side. We'll come back to those once we've installed the bumper and fished the line through the fair lead. But for now, we'll grab fair lead, bolt through the front, and then a washer and a nut on the backside. There's not really too much slop in those holes, but just enough that you want to make sure that you get it straightened and you like how it looks before you really tighten down. So for this van, we are going to install some of the Baja Squadron lights right here in the cutouts. You can fit any 3-inch pod light in there. These are obviously our favorites. There's some on the site as well, but we'll run through getting those installed. So on the Squadrons, you'll see the bracket has a little bit of like a forward lean to it, or like the backside of this. The brackets go like this. They go with the little crush washer or lock washer, serrated washer, whatever, goes inside of the bracket as well, and then the bolt from the outside. Now we are gonna mount the Squadrons to the bracket welded on in here. There's a slot in there for your adjustment in to out, but the Squadron comes with the hardware needed, so you go bolt, washer through from the top side, and then a washer and a nylock from the bottom. Once your lights are installed, go ahead and tighten down that Allen screw to lock that rotation in place. Once you get the harness untangled, you can go ahead and plug your lights in. You'll see there's some holes here to route cables through, and then there's some tabs to zip tie through. Don't zip tie just yet, because we're also gonna run the parking sensors and get all that in there before we actually zip tie things down. Okay, next we are gonna tackle the parking sensors. Your kit comes with 4 of our custom-made parking sensor bezels. These will get pushed into the bumper, and then we are gonna unmount the harness from the existing plastic bumper. You'll notice that there is a little indicator on the top side of this. You wanna make sure that that lines up with the keyway that's cut into the aluminum plate, as well as this is vertical, so these fins are on the top and the bottom. So we are gonna unmount the harness from the bumper. A really good idea is to just take a photo with your phone of the orientation of all these parking sensors. We need to get them installed back in the same orientation that they are now. You'll see most of them point the plug away from the center of the van in this direction, except for the one over by the main harness plug is still pointed back towards the center. To get these undone, there is 2 clips on the top side that you'll just need to take a screwdriver and pry up so that it releases to pull out. Now that we have the harness pulled out, we're gonna fish it through these 2 bigger holes, pull it through and get them pressed into the bezels that we just installed. You'll notice that we only installed 4 of those bezels in this bumper. That's because the 2 farthest on the outside are actually gonna stay in the plastic. So when you go to install this, make sure you leave the brown colored ones, or the very first one and the very last one uninstalled, and we'll get those back into the plastic when we reassemble it. It's essential that when you're running this harness, you actually tuck this wire here behind this plate. The reason being, if you're running a winch, that spool is really, really close, and we wanna make sure that this never gets caught in there or that it doesn't rub through and wear through this over time. So we're gonna loosen up this plate here, tuck that cable back in there, and then tighten it down. If you're OCD like me, now is your favorite part. We're gonna do all the cable management. So there's a bunch of tabs throughout the bumper to help zip tie things too, to keep them out of the way so you never see them and that they never get tied up in anything else. If you've never heard of flush cutters, definitely go get a pair of those. They're really flat on one side so that when you're cutting these zip ties, you don't have a little jagged edge sticking out to come cut yourself with later. So get some flush cutters. It is now time that we are gonna cut the plastic bumper. So a body saw, a pneumatic body saw like this is our favorite tool to do so. You can use a cutoff wheel. You could even probably get away with a jigsaw or something if you had to. These are relatively cheap on Amazon though, so if you have a compressor, I would definitely recommend getting a body saw. We're gonna take that line that we had cut earlier and that we traced out and just follow along with that. Don't stress this cut too much. We have some trim lock that's included that's gonna get pushed onto this edge after we cut it. That'll kind of help even out any of those wavy surfaces. If you don't want to run that trim lock though, you don't have to. You can really, really take your time and get this cut perfect. There's still a chance that there's gonna be a little bit of a gap in there though, so don't stress this cut too much. Once you've got your 2 side cuts made, we're gonna come back and trim out these 4 little guys that connect in there, as well as this center section. Now, we left this space down, but that's just so the trim lock has a place to grab. For this center section, we wanna cut it as close to this edge as possible. Just make sure you don't come down, stay going sideways, because there's some structure behind there that you wanna keep just to help maintain the strength of that plastic. So get as close as you can while going sideways like this. Depending on how you cut it, the edge might be kind of rough like ours is, so we're gonna take some sandpaper and clean up that edge. Again, it's gonna get covered with the trim lock, so it doesn't need to be perfect. After getting the front plastic cut, we are gonna come trim out the fender liner here. This one's in here a little bit janky. We had to steal one out of one of the other vans because I had already chopped mine off on this van here, so it'll sit in here a little bit nicer, but we'll show you where to cut on this side. So basically, we're just gonna cut right along this edge here, basically getting rid of everything on this side of this vertical face. The last thing that we need to do before mounting the bumper onto the van is to remove these cover plates so that we can access the mounting holes. It's also a good idea to go ahead and remove this center adaptive radar piece so that it's out of the way and we can reassemble it later. So same as before, we're gonna mount this up with just one bolt to hold it in place, and then we're gonna Loctite all of the other bolts, take that one out, Loctite it, and put it back on as well. We'll hold it up into place and get the bottom ones set in there. Now that we have the bumper held in place with that one bolt, we're gonna go ahead and get the fender liners attached. You have these little L brackets on each side with some captive clip nuts that go on there. And then we will drill holes in the fender liner to mount those together and hold it firm in place. So one thing that you might want to do is hold these brackets a little bit back from this edge. That will allow this liner to actually rest on top of here and be held kind of tight, and it'll give you a little bit cleaner of an edge down here. If you hold them far out like this, it can hang down, so it kind of just depends on how this piece of plastic fits in your van and how it fits up here, but having it tucked back like this and resting on the edge is a nice thing. So you'll see that there's a three-sided corner right here, and the fender liner doesn't want to tuck back behind there. So what we need to do is put a little bit of a slit right where this top surface is here, so that the fender liner actually can tuck back behind the bumper skin right there. Once you've got that slit in there, it's time to drill the holes. We're gonna push the fender liner back up into place, get it positioned where we like it, and then probably push up on the fender, depends on how yours is fitting, and drill out the holes through the upper bracket and into this fender liner, and then we'll put a bolt from the inside back through to capture that all together and hold it tight. If you did run some lights or have extra wires in here like we do, now is a good time to get those zip tied nice and tidy up out of the way, because here in a second we're gonna put the skin back over and this won't really be accessible. So it's the same thing on this side, only difference is that you have the def tank over here. Getting the brackets in and everything is pretty straightforward. Drilling the holes is a little trickier over on this side. What you're gonna have to do is tuck that fender liner behind those brackets and drill from inside of the wheel here. So just turn your tire out of the way and poke your holes back this way. Then put the captive nuts on and then pull that liner back over the outside and fasten it back down. Sorry, I can't show you. I don't have the liner over on this side. Again, we cut them up already for this van, so but it's pretty straightforward. It's just get the wheel out of your way and take your time. Okay, with the fender liners mounted up, it's time to get the adaptive radar installed. So grab the parts that you disassembled earlier on, this front cover plate, plastic, and this little mounting bracket, and we are gonna get this guy bolted up. To start off with that, get it unplugged, get the assembly out there. What we're gonna do is take this radar itself and get it held into this bracket here. You'll see there are 3 little pins that align with this bracket. You want to make sure that the shiny side here goes out towards the front or away from the flanges, and that the label on the back here goes towards this side, so that the shiny side faces out in front of your van. A little trick that makes this a lot easier is to actually take a zip tie and hold this in place, because the bracket kind of wants to spring out away from you, and it makes it a little tricky when you're installing it to hold it all together. Then we are going to fish the wires down through from the top side. This is super critical with your winch, that you keep them out of the way of the winch, so it's best to get it to come up through the center here and then zip tie it off to this tab right here, and then one off on the back side to make sure that that's held out of the way. And then on the inside here, it is extremely critical not to get that wire tucked back behind this bracket. It needs to stay in front of these tabs right here. So we're actually gonna, first things first, is zip tie this guy down in the front here, just so we make sure that it doesn't go back there. And the way this plug works, there's like a little bit of a D shape on there that goes towards the back, and this thing is gonna sit down in the bottom of the radar. So you can kind of hold that in place and then get yourself sucked down. Cool. Take the sensor, get it plugged in, make sure that it clicks and that it's in there good. And then we are gonna tuck this guy in there tight. As we tighten this guy down, there's some adjustment in those captive clip nuts in there, so it could slide up. You just wanna make sure that it's pushed down as far as it can so that this doesn't get tucked back behind this flange at all. Grab your shorter 1/4-20s from that pile. The longer ones, the 4, go to the plate. A little bit of Loctite, and get this thing screwed in. Grab the cover plate and the screws, put some Loctite on those as well. Next, we are gonna put the trim lock onto the plastic bumper skin, the OEM one. You should have 2 pieces in your kit. We'll line them out and trace them up there. There is one spot on the backside where you do need to put a little bit of a slit on the inside of this that it just presses over kind of a support rib that's in there. And then at the end, it'll be a little bit long and you'll cut it to length. Okay, we are ready to put the OEM bumper skin and grill back onto the van. You can kind of set it on top of your bumper there and rest it there while we plug all of the fog lights, the parking sensors, and that whole harness set back in. Once all your wires are connected and you double check that, you're ready to just snap everything back in. When you're clipping these side pieces in, it might want to go underneath of these, but it actually goes over top of these clips here. Once you get the plastic OEM skin back on, the next step is to make sure your bumper is centered where you like it. You could look at the logo and the fair lead, that parking sensor bezel, and just kind of eyeball. Also, you could look out on the outsides and see how it sits in regards to where that plastic skin and trim comes down on the sides. But get it centered up. Then we're gonna take the remaining 3 bolts that we have, Loctite those, get those ones set in place. Remember to pull that one back out that we didn't put Loctite already, Loctite that, and then get that one reinstalled, and then tighten back up. Once all of your bolts holding the bumper skin on are tight, we're gonna grab these cover plates that we took off earlier, fish them back up inside the hole there, Loctite these bolts, and get them tightened up. If you are running a winch and you've got a fair lead, now is a good time to get the hook installed. There is a bigger hole in the bottom. The pin goes down through. You'll put the eyelet at the end of your rope or your cable through here, and then you have a snap ring that goes down on the inside of this. You wanna make sure that this snap ring goes all the way down and expands, snaps back into place, and then it's in there really good. I ran all of the wiring for the winch and for the lights up into this area here. We're not gonna cover how to connect all that in this video. You should reference the manufacturers that you bought the lights and the winch from and follow their instructions for the schematics. I'm gonna run a single terminal from the battery up here to connect it all and then feed through into the cab right through this boot for the switch. But besides that, I'm just gonna follow their instructions. So if you're running the bumper without a skid plate, and you also live in a state that requires you to run a front license plate like we do here in Oregon, there is this little bracket that's included. It bolts up to these rib nuts that are in the front side of this, and you're good to go. If you also purchased a skid plate to fit up to the bumper, you can just set this off to the side. All right, it is time to assemble our skid plate. There are a handful of different components, and we'll walk through how all those mount up to each other. There are a lot of screws to this though, so if you have a drill with an attachment for a socket or an Allen, 5/32 Allen for your drill, it makes life a lot easier and saves your hands. So definitely recommend getting a drill and a box wrench for assembly here. First part we're gonna do is to assemble the vent cover here to the bumper skid plate. This is that little section right here. After you get the vent bolted onto this piece, we are gonna bolt this overall bumper skid plate up to the engine skid plate, or the big one down here. You're gonna use the 3/8 button head screws here from the outside, and then a washer and a nylock. Leave those 2 bolts loose for now because we still need to mount up these corner brackets. So leave those a little bit adjustable. Now we're gonna mount up these corner support brackets. If it's easier, you also can swap to a 7/16 socket and then just use an Allen so that you can use a drill from this side as well. Then repeat on the other side. After those corner braces are in, we are gonna mount up these 2 kind of L-shaped brackets onto the bumper and then onto the other bracket. And then this is what's gonna tie us to the subframe underneath of the van. Leave these guys a little bit loose so that we can adjust them once we go to fit it up underneath the van to the subframe. But you wanna actually get them almost as tight as you can while still being able to move them, because the workspace down there is actually really, really tight to get tools into. So the more slop you have in that screw, the harder it is to get it out once we're down there. So get them snug as you can while still moving. Now we're gonna use bracket SP2 and bolt it up to SP1. We're gonna use the hex head flange bolts, and you want the head of the bolt on this side of the bracket and the ears of the bracket down and out away from it. Now we are ready to mount the skid plate up to the van and to the bumper. The first thing to do is to remove the M8 bolts from the subframe mounts here, and then after we get the plate up there, well, we're gonna replace those with some longer ones. Now that those bolts are out, we are ready to hang the skid plate and get those back ones bolted up. The easiest thing to do is actually to use these recovery hooks through the opening that they fit around and hang the bumper from these hooks. Be careful as you put it in there not to scratch anything, but these are more than strong enough to support that. And then we'll crawl underneath of the van, push up on the backside, and get those M8 bolts started. We are gonna leave those ones down there a little bit loose for now and tighten up these 4 here. Again, if you live in a state that requires you to run a front license plate, this bracket goes over top of the skid plate and mounts back into those same riv nuts. If not, you don't need to run it. Take the button heads, a little bit of Loctite, and then tighten down all 4 of these ones. With these 4 tightened up here, we're gonna crawl back underneath, tighten down those M8 bolts to the frame, and then we're gonna tighten up all of the bolts that hold those 2 brackets together. And that's it, it's finally installed. If there's some questions that you have, anything that we didn't cover in the video, I know we covered a lot, hit us up at customer service. Our team would be happy to help answer any questions or calm any nerves, or if something unique you got in your van that sticks out, just let us know. We'd be happy to help.